Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about a couple uses of the genitive. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the partitive genitive and the objective genitive. We'll talk a little bit about what these are, how we might be able to tell that they exist, how we're going to be able to see them, and any changes that they might make on word choice. So let's start things off with the partitive genitive. As far as the partitive genitive is concerned, we might also see that this will sometimes be referred to as the genitive of the whole. And that'll make sense in just a moment. The partitive genitive tends to follow words denoting quantity. So words like many, multi, few, pauci, or even specific quantities like for, quatuor, or any other number, of course, could work there. The genitive is going to represent the larger whole of which something, the part, belongs. And so this is why it's both called the partitive genitive, because we're talking about the part that something belongs to, and why we might call it the genitive of the whole, because the genitive represents the larger whole to which something belongs. When it comes to translation, generally we're going to translate this into English using the word of. So let's look at an example. One example we might see is the word or the phrase multi-westrum. And here we see those things that we would expect to see. First of all, we see the word multi means many, and that denotes quantity. And so we do want to see a quantitative word. We'll also notice here the word westrum. Westrum is the genitive of the pronoun wos. And of course, when we translate this, we're going to translate this as many of you. And we see that of coming into play. We might remember, of course, that we're going to see that you, the genitive, is the larger whole of which the part, many, is comprised. We'll also see here that this is going to bring us into something to consider, and that is using the partitive genitive with words like nos and wos. You might recall that these two pronouns have two different genitive forms. However, we'll only use one of these forms when we're dealing with the partitive genitive. For nos, we'll use the genitive form nostrum for partitive genitives. And for wos, we'll use the genitive form westrum for the partitive genitives. So keep in mind that these are the ones that end with that um form. And so that might be a good way to remember that the um goes with the partitive genitive. So now let's talk about the objective genitive. When we talk about the objective genitive, it can be used with nouns, adjectives, and verbs. Regardless of which one it's being used with, we will find that it tends to deal with words of actions that govern these, or words of feeling. And so even when we're talking about nouns and adjectives, these tend to be words that are closely related to verbs. Now the objective genitive is related to the idea of belonging. And so we're going to see that these tend to show that one thing belongs to another. Which again gives us the idea of genitives, which we often think of as showing possession. This is a similar related form. It's going to allow us to create a focus for another word that's in the sentence to focus on. When we translate these, once again, we can use that common genitive translation of, but we can also choose to use the word for in English. Let's look at an example here. We might see something like amor pecuniae. And so let's talk about these words. Again, we see amor. Here it is a noun. It's related to the verb amo, love, which expresses an action. Pecuniae here is in the genitive. And so when it comes to translation, we might want to use something like the love for money. Of course, we could also use the genitive translation of here and say the love of money. Now, again, when we think about words like nos and wos, it's important to know that the objective genitive will impact such words. And so as we see these, we might see that, again, they have two different forms. For nos, the genitive nostri is going to be used with the partitive genitive, while for wos, we'll use westri. And so you'll see that these are always going to be different from the partitive genitives, where the partitive genitive use those forms that end with um. The objective genitive is going to be using those forms that end with long I. So keep that in mind as you work with these. It will make identifying what type of genitive you're working with very easy. And it'll also be important if you're going to be trying to create Latin sentences of your own. So now that you have a better idea of the objective and the partitive genitive, let's get out there and do some Latin.